Welcome to 45 RPENS with Ernie Enns and Nigel Bart. Episode 5, Season 2, first episode of 2023. I'm here with Ernie Enns in Golden Prairie Arts Council, GPAC, otherwise known as GPAC, here in Carmen, Manitoba, on Treaty 1 territory, and we are live. Not necessarily live, but I don't edit these broadcasts. I'm turning off the heater background, and we pre-record these. They go up a week, usually within the week, and I put them up on YouTube. And we're eternally grateful for our listening audience, who helps us determine the focus and themes of our discussions. So I'm here with Ernie again, and Ernie and I today are going to discuss guitar players. I chose 3 guitar players. The ones I chose are Steve Vai, Eddie Van Halen, and Phil Collen of Def Leppard. And Ernie's going to talk about George Harrison, Randy Bachman, and John Fogerty. And we're just going to explore those. Probably, I guess we could start with my guitar players and move on to yours.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. So I should say the date. It's January 27th. And it's been a while since we recorded one of these. Been busy folk around here. So I'm going to start by introducing Steve Vai and how I was introduced to him. It would have been 1991. I'm thinking I was in grade 11, and I got a little cassette of Passion and Warfare, and the artwork caught my eye. It was so fancy. That album, I think it was just at the time when David Lee Roth broke away from Van Halen and started his solo career. And you know who joined David Lee Roth as the guitar player? Stevie Vai.
Oh, good guess.
And Eddie Van Halen and those of that crew were separated, estranged from David Lee Roth at that moment in time. But you know, the one thing about Stevie Vai that I really love is his unique guitar playing and his sort of psychedelic style. As an artist, I loved his style. His artwork on his album was amazing. Passion and Warfare. It's psychedelic is the only way I can explain it. I hadn't seen art like that when I was a kid before, but I really loved it. It's bright. It's neon. There's all sorts of surreal imagery in it, and his guitar playing was ultimately so magical. He used a different type of reverb on his guitars, or distortion. It wasn't your typical AC/DC or Van Halen reverb distortion. He used a cleaner sound with a little bit of a real high stereo definition sound to it. And I was taken by it instantly. It was quite magical. And he was such his harmonies that he layered the guitar so sweetly on there. And as a novice guitar player, I didn't take lessons, or even, I was a bass player, but I still gravitated to that. Like, it was really sweet. And you have something called up there about Steve Vai?
Well, I pulled up the album cover that you talked about, Passion and Warfare.
Yeah.
Just so I could see what it looks like, and it is very cool. It is very, very different, intricate. It looks like there's little fairies or something in the air. Is that the album you're talking about right there, right?
That's the one, man.
Okay. Yeah.
Steve Vai was very eccentric. I'll get you a sec to read it in a second, but go ahead, read it.
What do you want me to read here?
If there's a little summary, maybe.
It right on this particular picture, it just shows the album. It was released on, this is just information, May 22nd, 1990 was the
Okay, so yeah,
released.
yeah,
Studio, The Mothership. That's a cool name.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, we'll have to call this studio the Sugar Beet Factory.
The Sugar Beet Factory. That's G-Pack.
I just thought of that right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, that's our name for this
Sugar
studio,
Beet
man.
Factory.
That's right. Do her up.
I love that.
Yeah,
Anyway, the label is relative. The producer, he produced his own album, Stevie Vai. That's always
Yeah,
impressive.
that's impressive for sure.
I like that. And so, so it has all kinds of stuff here. I'll click on, this is just stuff I'm getting off the internet, so I can't take credit for it.
Yeah.
But it's a fairly long write-up. I don't know how much you want.
Read a few sentences.
Passion and Warfare was written based on a series of dream sequences. Interesting, very interesting.
Yeah.
That Vai had when he was younger. And in the guitar music book of the album, Vai sums it up as Jimi Hendrix meets Jesus Christ at a party and Ben Hur threw for Mel Mel Blanc. And Ben Hur threw for Mel Blanc. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, no, it's two other characters, but
Ben Hur, you know who it is. Mel Blanc, wasn't he the guy that did the Bugs Bunny voice?
Maybe,
I think that was Mel Blanc.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. It was all recorded in the Mothership studio at his home in Hollywood Hills, a 1,600 square foot building, in which his guitar parts for the Whitesnake in 1989 album, Slip of the Tongue, were also recorded.
Yeah.
As such, Whitesnake frontman David Coverdale has small spoken parts on the album. Coverdale, Adrian Vandenberg, and Rudy Sarzo are credited with background vocals. So there's a little bit more here. Vai states that planning the album started as early as 1982, but was shelved after joining David Lee Roth band and not picked up again until parting ways with Roth in 1989.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of what you're.
That's what I was going with. Yeah. Yeah, he's an Ibanez guitar player.
And he did wonders for Ibanez because they were, a relatively a lesser company.
Yeah.
But when you have people like Stevie Vai picking up the guitar, it does wonders for your.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he did a lot for Ibanez company.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. Like Passion and Warfare. There was another. I do remember him talking about the dream aspect. The dream aspect of singing, or sorry, guitar playing, and writing his music. He was very like psychological. He really explored psychology and sort of vivid dreaming and dreaming, sort of that. The whole dream while you're awake and controlling your dreams. Very interesting, intelligent guy, and he does YouTube videos. I don't know, you can search him up.
Yeah.
He does really interesting YouTube videos where he'll teach you a song. Like there's a song he was working on called "For the Love of God." One of my favorite songs, "For the Love of God." It sounds so sweet. That's from that album, and he teaches you how to play it, and it's one of the best songs on that album, and most successful. And yeah, honestly, like Steve Vai is one of my heroes, and he shares his experience in a really humble way. He's a humble sort of artist. When he was younger, he was very eccentric and out there. Like he had a little pyramid that he'd compose and write music and perform under. Like sort of a thing hanging from the ceiling.
Okay.
But he's eccentric. He's just different.
I think a lot of musicians are.
Yeah.
Like artists in general, I think are eccentric.
Yeah.
That's what I find anyway. But my, I've never been into that Stevie Vai. Great guitar player, right?
Yeah.
But it's never been my style of music. But what I know of him is, I'm a huge fan of Eric Johnson, And
Oh yeah,
there's a DVD out by on it is Stevie Vai,
yeah.
Eric Johnson, and Joe Satriani.
Oh,
Those
Joe Satriani, I
those three
know.
guys,
Yeah,
and they do a full concert. I'll lend it to you sometime if you want to see
please.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And what they do is they each have their own concert that they do
yeah, yeah, yeah.
on this DVD.
Yeah.
And at the end, the three of them get together and they do some stuff, and it's really good.
That is cool,
It's really
man.
good.
That
And
is
so,
really cool.
so G3 is definitely worth picking up if you see it anywhere.
Nice.
So that's my experience with him. But prior to that, I know Stevie Vai because he played in the movie Crossroads. Have you seen
Of
Crossroads?
course, that's where I first saw him.
In
Like he was the
Crossroads.
devil in
He was the
Crossroads.
devil. Devil's guitar player.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was
And
so
he went up
amazing.
against I forget
Yeah,
his
the
name,
little,
kid.
the
Chachi.
Italian
I
guy.
call him Chachi because
Chachi, yeah.
he was in a different show
Yeah,
called Chachi. I forget his name, but
Yeah.
he went up against him. And do you know who
Yeah.
played the guitar?
Well,
for the
yes, I
kid?
know this. I know the Eric Clapton. No.
No?
The other guy, Ry Cooder.
Ry Cooder.
There you
That's
go.
it. Ry Cooder did it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it was such a great movie. And to me, that whole album, or I have the soundtrack, the whole soundtrack is very good. Really
Yeah.
good. But there's a song in there called, what's it called? I can't even think of it now. It's there's a song in there where anyway his girlfriend in the movie, like Chachi's girlfriend,
Yeah.
leaves him, breaks up with him, and leaves.
Right.
And then he
right.
sits down with the guitar and he starts to. It's called "Breaking Up Blues" or
Yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. It had a name like
Yeah.
that. That song is just, to me, that song is very special.
Very good,
Yeah,
man.
and so, but that's what I know about Stevie Vai. I never
Yeah,
really
yeah.
followed him a lot, but
That's good though. It gives you so this gives our listeners a little entrance point into Steve Vai. Like if you're and guitar players, because honestly, if you're a young budding guitar player or an older guitar player just picking it up for the first time or just reintroducing yourself to
yeah,
it.
or just pure enjoyment, like to be able
Pure
to play like
enjoyment.
Stevie Vai is a reach, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but just to pick it up for pure enjoyment, to watch that,
Yeah.
that G3 thing with those three guys,
That's right. That's right.
it's just awesome.
Yeah. Now the other guy is similar, Eddie Van Halen, who just passed away last year, I believe.
Right.
Eddie Van Halen, another musical hero of mine, guitar hero, and I really like the way he decked out his guitar. Is the red guitar with the sort of
Yeah.
tape, the black and white
Yeah.
marks. It's so cool.
Yeah.
And his style of playing was very definitive. So if you know on any of the Van Halen albums, you'll understand what I'm saying. When it was definitive, he really played a certain style, and he heard music a certain way, like notes and everything. The way he put it together was quite remarkable. I think Eddie is, without a doubt, one of the best guitar players from this decade.
You know, of all time is what a lot of people would say,
Yeah,
especially
he was-
of that era or
Yeah.
that style of guitar playing. He was like the pioneer of a lot of
The
that
pioneer,
stuff.
yeah.
Of a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of that stuff that, you know, touch and all that stuff and
Wow.
touch harmonics and all that stuff.
Yeah,
He was so good at it.
and the tabs or whatever when he
Yeah.
how do you
tapping
what do you
and
call
all
that
that.
diddly like
Yeah,
that
tap
stuff.
harmonics is what they
Tap
call it.
harmonics,
And you
yeah.
can find that all on the internet, but these guys on the internet learned about that and learned how to do that from Eddie. Like he was
He
very much a
was.
pioneer.
He was so
of- Yeah.
he was inventive and ingenuitive. Like he would just like he was an artist.
He was
so
an
he would
artist,
create
yeah, in
that
every
sound.
sense, yeah.
So it was pretty powerful.
and the sound, even the sound he had one time by mistake plugged his amp into a, I don't even know where I read this. Maybe when he passed away, I read up on him. But he plugged his amp into 220 by mistake, and it made this funny sound. And he loved that, so he
Yeah,
made an
yeah.
amp to sound like that. You know, to
So
do that.
cool with that.
I don't know,
with
whatever it was.
Huge, like
Whatever
it's
it was,
he had a
it's-
meaty distortion.
Yeah.
Different than Steve Vai for sure.
Yeah.
Steve Vai is way more smooth in stereo,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Eddie was raunchy in his metal
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah, he was
and that was the
definitely-
beauty of him. Like the Van Halen sound was built
He
on the
was-
guitar and drums, of course, of Alex,
Yeah.
but in the strong bass.
And
But-
Eddie Van Halen was a guitar player's guitar player.
He was.
Really,
He was.
he
Yeah.
was one of those guys, and there's a few of them over the years.
Yeah, and he maintained that identity because I know there's bands who are like sort of one time wonders almost. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but they came and they went and they were defined by the age, like 80s rock, sort of like hair
Yeah,
bands.
yeah,
I won't even name any of them, but you sort of know that those bands sort of lived in the 80s. They often mimicked Van Halen sound,
absolutely.
but Eddie was a pure innovator, and in terms of his style, it did carry through, and it
Yeah.
started other genres of music. Like Eddie was definitely one. Like I think of that the one song, Spanish Fly, which is amazing. That's a definitive little song that is on the first
Yeah.
album of
What's
Van Halen 1, I believe,
okay?
and it's called Spanish Fly. It's a little hidden track, I believe, but it's
Yeah,
amazing. Like
I
you
don't
can
know.
search it up on Spotify or whatever, but
I'll have to check it out.
amazing
What's
guitar playing.
that other one he does? Like that he's really known for. It's an instrumental.
Well, there's Jump. He plays keyboard too. Like Jump is a really popular one.
Yeah, no,
But
no, it's strictly an instrumental. And it's tip of my tongue, and I can't think of it.
okay. Um,
Yeah,
hmm.
like I know, like Scott. That's his favorite song.
Oh
That's his
yes, yeah,
all-time
yeah.
favorite song.
It's
And
not Mr. Ice Cream Man or something
no,
like
no,
that.
I like that one too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I like that one.
yeah. I can't think of it off the top. But,
Yeah, my favorite uh, Van Halen song is "Dance the Night Away."
oh my
The
gosh,
way it
yeah,
starts,
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
just you just feel like jumping in the air and
You
dancing.
feel like there's magic in that song, eh? Like
It's
it's
just
so
that's
good.
awesome. That
Yeah, yeah.
is,
It takes you to a place that's just
yeah,
perfect. There's
that was,
something, and there is something magical when artists get that sound that just
yeah.
pumps your
And
your
I think
your.
that would have been probably their breakout song. They might have,
Yeah,
done okay before that, but that made them an instant world hit. That "Dance the
yeah,
Night Away," and it was just,
yeah,
it
instant.
was just,
And well, they
full
were
speed ahead after
by
that.
by
Yeah,
by no over exaggeration, those guys were like they were I'd say like mega influential in the Western sort of music history that we have here in America, North America. So,
yeah.
they spread all global, but it was wonderful. And the last guitar player I want to talk about, and then we'll switch over. I don't know how much time we've been talking.
Oh, it doesn't matter. We can
Yeah,
always carry on next time.
yeah. I don't even know how much time. Oh yeah, we're halfway through, so I'll finish up my side, and we'll talk about your guitar players. But Phil Collins, not to be confused with Phil Collins. These two Brits are essentially they're both British, but Phil Collins without the S is the guitar player for Def Leppard, and Def Leppard has the longevity of like a turtle, like one of those big mammoth turtles in the ocean that never dies. Def Leppard, and each album is amazing of Def Leppard. Like they're still going today. These guys are like fit, and this shows you that it's not all about partying because these guys have lasted the test of time. They didn't burn out. They've and they're not fading either. And one of my favorite albums of that Phil Collins plays on is Euphoria. It's not the first album, Hysteria. It's actually, which is great, but Euphoria is about the fourth, fifth album of. I think they have many albums, like 20 albums, just about, but they're still going. Phil Collins is one of my favorite all time, and he plays like no other, and he has a really distinct sound again, and it's all about harmonies, and he's the lead guitar player. And Def Leppard was sometimes categorized as a hair band, like a metal hair band of the 80s, but their longevity shows that they can branch into 90s and the millennial, like this decade. Like they're very relevant in all their song lyrics and their sound too. And yeah, one of my big heroes is Phil Collins, the guitar player. And you know, they're there was a guitar player with Def Leppard who I really liked too, Steve Clark, and he lost his life to suicide, drugs, and overdose. And but Steve Clark was the rhythm guitar player, and Phil Collins was there playing. He's been throughout the whole band, Phil Collins' career. They also had some other guitar players in the early days. but like Mutt Lange, who produced Def Leppard,
Mm.
created a stereo,
Oh, I
like a
didn't know
really
that.
high stereo sound. They used Q sound, I believe, which is like this super high stereo digital sound that was also in conjunction to like bands like Chicago and other bands that created these beautiful harmonies that were just impeccable. Anyways, that's sort of a little bit about Phil Collin, and yeah, he was he redefined the whole party stereotype of artist because he's one of the cleanest, cuttest guys. He's so fit, he's buff, like he's muscular, and he's so clean. Like he's not a druggy artist. Like he doesn't use drugs or alcohol. Whereas a lot of the stereotype of like those rock bands were all about drugs and alcohol. So, but um, Phil Collin redefined in my heart the spirit of sort of like that, like a way forward in terms of metal guitar, but um, and it branches into pop rock, like
Mm.
so easily. So,
Mm. Yeah.
um, and I've seen these guys play a couple of times. Def Leppard is
Like Def Leppard,
definitely.
you've seen them. You've
I've
been to a
seen them,
con.
yeah, a couple of times. They're
Oh,
so
yeah.
good. They're so good. So that's yeah. So that's my end here, but and we're one thing a segue here. Ernie and I'll talk about is like how we gain our musical tastes. Like my tastes are different than Ernie's, and sometimes it's just the time of the age we grow up in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That's a big part of it,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and it's also genetic, wouldn't you say? Like we're born with hearing things a certain way,
Yeah.
and like the
Yeah.
family we're raised in, our environment, so sort of
Yeah.
psychosocial, sort of like inner and outer sort of nature versus nurture.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting actually that because you probably like the same music now as you did when you were first influenced, 9 or 10 or 11. I don't know how old you were when music first, right? And so you love that same stuff, and
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like that too. And for me, it was the early '70s, and when I was 17 and 71.
Mm-hmm.
So already that starting in '69, I was always my ear was already picking up the music I would love for a
Yeah,
lifetime,
yeah,
and that's exactly how it is. And it went through right till the mid '70s.
yeah,
So
yeah,
late '60s to mid '70s is my range
yeah,
of
yeah,
things. So you still love that same music, and same as you.
yeah,
Whatever
yeah,
you heard from Def Leppard back then,
yeah.
you still love that same song.
I do, I do, I do.
And so, and you can't explain how you like that particular song, really.
A
It's just
little bit. Like
you
it's
loved it.
weird. It's weird, but
You loved it for a
I
reason.
loved it for a reason, and I think it was because in the household I grew up in, my dad was a music connoisseur, and mom and dad we were musical. I grew up listening to like Paul Simon Graceland
Ah,
and
yeah, yeah.
like Diana Ross's album, the breakthrough album where she went really high pop in the '80s, and Cyndi Lauper and
Ah, yeah.
like these
Okay.
'80s bands where I was just like a young teen, not a teen, but a young kid,
Right.
and I found that sound like Glass Tiger,
Yeah.
one of the major. I heard that on the radio, and
Yeah. And
kaboom!
you
Like
still like it,
I
just like you
still
did back
love
then.
it.
And so you latch on to certain music for whatever reason,
It
right?
is, yeah,
And you never let go. And that's the way it is with me too.
yeah.
And so, oh yeah, okay, we're gonna talk about guitar players. That's my favorite
Yeah,
subject.
so go to it. We'll tie these themes into that
And
conversation. So,
you can say so and so is your favorite guitar player, or you can say so and so is the best guitar player of all time, and all this stuff. And there is no such thing as the best guitar player of all time
yeah.
because each guitar player in his own right is very very good, and they're
Yes.
all kinds. Like people will say, Lenny Breau is the greatest guitar player of all
Yeah.
time because Chet Atkins said so.
Right.
Well,
This
that's
is this
in
is yeah.
in his style of playing he was, and
This is very important what you're saying, Ernie.
he was so innovative, and even
Yeah.
guys like Randy Backen, who I'll talk about in a bit,
Yeah.
learned. He'd sit and watch Lenny Breau,
Yeah.
and then he'd go home and he'd learn those progressions and he'd turn it into a rock song Like
Yeah.
Undone is actually may as well have been written by Laney Bro. That the backing track of that,
Yeah.
and so stuff like that. But if we want to start off here with George Harrison,
I was just gonna say about the what you were just saying there. I agree because as an artist too, like
yeah,
people compare themselves way too much,
yeah,
and they try to
yeah,
look the same in their art, just like
yeah,
a lot of musicians try to gain a certain sound like another musician.
right,
But I believe that the
yeah,
more you pick up your own certain style, even if it starts really basic, like very basic,
yeah,
and you hear with your ears and make sounds the way you like, that's the best magical
yeah,
sound. And that's what I think these big guitar players do. Like they
yeah,
start somewhere
yeah,
and they climb that mountain. Like they play the sounds they hear and they want. And that's what makes them unique and
yeah,
special because
yeah,
like the sort of the copying, the days of copying, well, anyone can really copy, but
exactly,
we're not meant to be totally photocopying when we're an artist. Like
yeah,
we're not photocopiers, we're sort of innovators artists.
yeah.
So anyways,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
I think
go.
one of the most important things about being a musician is, to learn to play somebody else's song is fun, but
Yes.
to perfect your own style is that's satisfaction.
Yes, yeah,
Do
yeah.
the
And it's
core, and
it's hard. I don't know, like to find your sound. Like it
it
like
just comes.
yeah,
I think
you're
it
right.
just comes
Yeah.
because I know what my
But
sound is when I play, type
yes.
thing, and I discovered that quite a few years ago is I don't really want to sound exactly like that guy. As much as I love that guitar playing, I'd rather sound like I sound, that sort
Yeah.
of thing. I think
Yeah,
is
yeah.
very important for any musician.
Yeah. Yeah,
Find
yeah.
your own sound and get good at it.
Yeah, and you have to do like there's no other point. Like you can't just imagine yourself playing. Like if you want to play good and you want to play your own style, your own way, you have to start like
And,
playing, and it can start when you're a kid. Like it doesn't
and
have to be
and how
when
you
you're. I was a mature guitar
and how
player, and
good you get is decided by you. Is how much effort you want to put into it.
that's right now.
But don't lose your soul, right?
Good point.
You know,
Again, yeah.
you
Explain
know.
that. Unpack that one a bit.
Yeah, like if you wanted to get just super 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 good and get famous and whatever, you'd have to sell your soul. Like in other words, you'd have to give up everything,
Yeah,
everything,
yeah,
and go that direction. And do you want
yeah,
to do that? Well, I know I didn't. There was a time when, I had a chance to go touring or
yeah,
whatever like
yeah,
that, and no, that's not what I want to do. I want to play guitar, have fun doing it, record my own music and all that,
yeah, yeah.
but I don't want to give up myself.
Like your family,
And
your
your
health,
everything
your
is included
job,
in that, but
yeah, like
your own
everything,
true
man.
self you don't want to give
Yeah,
up.
you don't ever give up your essence. And a lot of
Yeah,
times, if I can
yeah,
reframe that, the industry strips us of our, as artists, it will
yeah.
take away from your passions and your essence sometimes
Yeah,
because the industry has a dark side too. Well, that's all I need to
yeah,
say, really, because people, I think,
yeah,
recognize that a lot of things about the industry push the artist to the point where they turn to drugs or they turn to
yeah.
addiction or they money comes easy and
Well, it's
and
all
also
money driven. All that stuff
yeah,
is money driven, which is kind of sad because music should be nothing to do with money. It
that's
shouldn't
right,
be.
man.
It should be something you
That's right.
create and enjoy,
Yeah.
type thing. But getting back to George Harrison, you know who George Harrison is? Yes, no, maybe
Mm-mm.
so. Beatles, right?
Of course.
Everybody
But
knows.
explain like I want to break this down to a novice listener who might not know anything about George Harrison or Steve Vai or anything. So introduce it in a way that a little more
Okay.
simpler for the basic listener.
Okay, so George Harrison was guitar player for the Beatles, but the way he got there was I think he was 14 or 15-year-old kid, and these other two guys in that school had connected already in the early 50s, I guess, or whatever. They had already connected. Like one was Paul McCartney and one was John Lennon, and our era knows those guys quite well. But they had already connected, and they had this little band, and they needed a guitar player. And then Paul had said, "Well, I know this kid," and he was younger. younger than us, you know, and at that age, a year or two makes a big difference, right?
Yeah.
But he plays guitar pretty good, so why don't we try him out? And so is this George Harrison joined them, and now they had, you know, the essence of the Beatles. The three of
Yeah,
them worked
yeah, yeah,
together, and
yeah.
they played together for years before they got good, and
Yeah, yeah.
that sort of thing. But George Harrison said himself, he said, Paul McCartney, music came naturally to him. Playing guitar or playing drums, it didn't matter what he
Yeah,
played or
yeah.
piano. It just came natural. He says, he, like George himself, had to, he says, I had to work at it. I had
Yeah.
to work at learning this stuff, this guitar stuff. And so now, after their careers are done, in fact, George has already passed away, but
Oh, yeah.
years later, George's guitar playing was just one of the best sounds of all time in my mind.
Yeah.
Whereas Paul McCartney, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't even rate as a guitar player. He's a
Right.
great bassist,
Yeah.
but as a guitar player, I wouldn't even rate him as a guitar player.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's because he worked at it. So the
Yeah.
lesson here is find your own style.
Yeah.
You know, and it comes. You don't have to like try to mathematically figure out what that is. You don't have to do that. It'll come, and you'll just
Yeah. Yeah.
realize it someday, and work at it, and just develop that style, and that'll be your
Yeah. Yeah.
style, and that's what will sound. That'll be a sound that you want, right? And
Yeah.
so George is a good example of how to do that. Is
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
start out and you know, and spend your life, if that's what you want to do. If you want to be a guitar player, don't give up yourself, but spend your life practicing. It's like one guy said, he's driving down the street in New York and he's looking for Carnegie Hall. So he stops the car, opens his window, and he says to a guy on the street there, he says, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? And the guy looks at him and says, practice, man, practice.
Oh, so good.
And so, you know, it's just
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
joke, but
That's
you know,
good.
that's true.
That's
If you
true.
want to get good at what you do, you
Yeah. Yeah.
practice. And I know for myself, being a guitar player or being a musician, I guess you can tell when you're watching somebody play or whatever, you can tell exactly how much or how little they practice.
That's right.
It
That's
shows,
right. That's right.
you know,
That's
and
right.
so
Yeah.
you got to do it a lot, practice a lot, and so. But George has. He's one of my favorite guitar players just because that sound he has. You know,
Yeah.
he can do slide guitar so nice and smooth, and you know, songs like My Sweet Lord and all that. Like it's just so
Yeah.
beautiful. And I have the album, like the All Things Must Pass album. That was his first album after the Beatles,
Okay.
and lots of instrumentals on there. And they were just rocking those guys. They were just,
I know. I
and
know.
so yeah, and so. That was George Harrison. So he's the guitar player for the Beatles, and another one of my favorite bands is Guess Who and BTO,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that would be Randy Bachman
Yeah.
out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and he grew up in North Kildonan.
Garden City.
No,
I
no,
thought somewhere around Garden City. I
Close
thought.
on. He lived on
North End there.
He lived on Dunrobin
Yeah.
because he's got this song with after he left the Guess Who, like he played with the Guess Who from. You know, same as the Beatles, it took many years of hard work and playing and all kinds of stuff before they were, you know, got to the point where they had a hit. Once
Yeah,
they had a
yeah.
hit, they had another hit, and next thing you know, they were worldwide. 1970,
Yeah.
they were top of the charts, even ahead of the Beatles. You know, so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so they did the same thing. They started here, but mostly, in my opinion, mostly to the credit of Randy Bachman because
Yeah.
he was a really really good guitar player.
Yeah. Yeah.
But more than that, he was a killer songwriter.
Yeah.
That's what he was.
Yeah. He was very.
And
good.
he was friends with Lenny Breau,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so he had that. And even more than all that, he had the passion.
Yeah.
Randy Bachman had the passion for music, and
Yeah.
to listen to his stories is so good. But if you sit down and listen to early Guess Who records, or even up to American Woman, and he quit.
Yeah, yeah.
He quit the band after American Woman album. You listen to that stuff. He was very very good guitar player.
Yeah.
You know, and
yeah.
he loved jazz, and it starts to show a little bit in there.
Exactly.
But then he quit the Guess Who, and he wanted to, and then he got together with his brothers, but they formed Brave Belt, and
Yeah.
they put out a couple of albums as Brave Belt, which was really cool folky stuff, you know. And then of course then he teamed up with his brothers because Chad Allen left, and so now they needed a singer, I guess, or whatever. So they brought in Fred Turner, and he's a Winnipeg boy, and Randy's two brothers. Tim and Rob put Rob on the drums, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago. Rob Backman.
Oh.
Yeah, he just died.
Oh.
69, young guy.
Oh.
I know. And then Tim Backman was on bass, and then they were had this little band like after Chad Allen left in Brave Belt. They had this little band, and they called themselves uh, Turner Backman or Backman Turner or something like that. But then one day they thought we need a band name, so they were in a restaurant in Ontario. Randy tells all these stories if you listen to.
I love his storytelling, by
Yeah,
the way.
and
Yeah.
he says sitting in a restaurant, and this restaurant was a trucker restaurant, and something on the sign somewhere said Overdrive. Overdrive. That's a cool word.
Yeah, is that
You know, so Backman Turner Overdrive, and so BTO was born there,
yeah.
and so they put out like I don't know several albums, and my own personal favorite is number one. The first album they put out is my favorite album.
Yeah.
That album I listened start to finish,
Yeah,
both
yeah.
sides. Never get sick of the one
Oh
note,
my
single note.
God.
It's just one of those albums. Again, like
Yeah.
we talked about Painter, how it's great it was, and we talked about. I don't know if we ever talked about Mujo Jaw.
We did. We touched on Mujaja.
Yeah, it was a great album
Yeah.
too. But BTO, their first album, is another one of those
Yeah.
in its entirety. It's just very, very
So
good.
good.
And so Randy Bachman, I think, is one of the most underrated guitar players,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
because as good as he is, and if you looked at his popularity in the world, I don't think a lot of people would know who that is.
Yeah.
And so, and probably because he wouldn't be considered to be the elite guitar players, but in my mind he is, just because of his
Sort of
style.
like
And the
a-
songwriting
yeah.
is so good. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. And, but anyway, yeah. And then there is another guy I was going to talk about, John Fogerty. He was a guy from California. And when he was in school, in high school, they had their high school band, just like all schools have. And so he got together with these guys, him and his brother Tom. They were together with these Stu Cook and Doug Clifford. So the four of them had this band. They called themselves the Blue Velvets. And they played these songs, and Tom Fogerty sang all these songs, and there were those cute little songs. And if you look hard enough, you can actually find this Blue Velvet stuff, but it's very hard. And
That
so
was the title of their.
the Blue Velvets is the name of their band.
Oh, that's their band's
Fogerty.
name. Okay,
So
yeah.
it was John Fogerty and his brother Tom,
Yeah,
and Tom was the lead singer,
Yeah.
and then Doug Clifford was the drummer, really good,
Yeah.
and Stu Cook was the bassist. So we had the Blue
cool, man.
Velvets in high school. So they were playing their songs like this, and then they changed their name to the Gollywogs. These same
Oh,
guys,
wow.
yeah, Gollywogs. And I saw that album one time, had it in my hand. I didn't buy it.
Oh.
I wish I had.
Yeah.
But anyway, it doesn't matter. I have the stuff all on CD now.
Yeah.
So, and they were Gollywogs for a little while. And then one day, they decided, for whatever reason, I never really researched it enough, but one day John decided he would sing. It was always Tom that was the lead singer. So John all of a sudden wrote these songs and said he wanted to sing them.
Oh, wow.
So John Fogerty became the lead singer. He was the lead guitarist. He became the producer of their own stuff, and he was the front man now. And they came up with songs like Susie Q. Everybody
Yeah.
knows that.
Okay, help me out. I'm having a thought. Who sings? Was that Woodstock in saying that epic song "Need a Little Help from My Friends"? Was that John Fogerty?
No, that's Joe Cocker.
Joe Cocker. Sorry.
Yeah,
I guess
I think they did play it.
they played at Woodstock.
They played
John
at Woodstock.
Fogerty? Yeah.
I remember he said because of all the bands everything got longer than it. You know, you're supposed to be on from now to then and now to then. Of course, everything got dragged out. Fogerty said they came on like 3:00 at nighttime. They came on. Everybody was sleeping, and they played their set.
Oh, wow.
And there was nobody really listening. Everybody was
shoot.
passed out or
Oh, my.
whatever it was. So
Yeah.
he said he was disappointed in that way, but they played at Woodstock,
That's
and
cool.
but since then, I mean, they had all these great hits.
Yeah.
You know, Lodi and Proud Mary and Who'll Stop the Rain and Have You Ever Seen the Rain and
Oh
Sweet
yeah, yeah, of
Hitchhiker
course. If you,
and Hey Tonight, and I could yeah, go
oh,
on and on and on, like
they're a
hits, hits,
mega
hits.
hit band.
Never had a number one record.
Yeah, yeah,
Always had, but they had a lot of number two records, and the
that's pretty
reason for
cool.
that is probably just timing, because
Yeah,
at the time when you had, let's say Proud Mary on the radio,
yeah, yeah,
then somebody like Zager and Evans comes along and they have number one hit or
yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah.
You'd have these one hit wonders that were
Just
there at
their
that time. So
timing. Yeah.
that's why they never had a number one hit.
Interesting. So
It
they were
was
kind of incognito the whole way. And
yeah,
that, yeah,
which kind of is, it kind of is part of their aura of their band.
yeah,
They were never a lucky band. Like they always had all these misfortunes
yeah.
in their
Oh
lives, and
yes,
that being
yeah,
one of them. It was
yeah,
like
yeah.
timing was wrong, and they had all these
Were
things.
they still called the Blue Velvets when John Fogerty took over, or what did you
No,
call them?
that's when they changed it to Creedence Clearwater Revival. Yeah,
Oh, I see.
yeah.
Like
Sorry,
I
I
don't
forgot to
even know
mention that.
CCR. Like I know
Yeah,
CCR, but I didn't
CCR.
know.
Yeah,
My gosh.
so they were the
Very
Gollywogs, and then it was Fogerty
very
lead, and it was a new record label or whatever. And the record label, I
yeah,
guess that
yeah,
didn't work out so well, but
yeah,
Fantasy
yeah,
did produce all those. And they had 7 studio albums,
yeah,
and at first couple of albums they had a lot of covers,
yeah, yeah.
but towards the end John did all the writing.
Cool. I'm just gonna check our time here.
Yeah.
See how we're doing. Oh, look at that. We got just enough time to sum up this conversation. Like we're at.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of the story of John Fogerty, and all three of those guys, like George Harrison from the Beatles, Randy Bachman from the Guess Who and BTO,
Yeah,
but namely the Guess Who, I guess, to begin with,
yeah, yeah.
and John Fogerty from CCR. Those are probably my 3 favorite bands of all time. That's
Nice,
probably
nice.
why I came up with those names, because those 3 bands is what I listen to.
Yeah, that's sweet. We challenge our audience listeners to do something like that. Pick 3 of your favorite. It doesn't have to be guitar players, but just put 3 guitar players or
Musicians.
drummers or musicians or singers, whatever you like, bands, and start there and think about why you like those bands and talk to your friends about it. Or if you don't have any friends, it's okay. Like just think about, reflect about why you like that music, and just think about it, because sometimes our tastes lead us, like our musical tastes or our art tastes, help us understand ourselves better and help us communicate better to the world around us. Like help us connect with people, because I don't think Ernie and I would necessarily have this tight relationship with each other, like a good working relationship, without the music. Like you're a carpenter, I'm an artist, and sometimes without music there, we probably would be in 2 separate rooms, sort of.
Yeah,
But because we're both musically inclined, it's music is a universal language too, and
absolutely.
that gift that you have, Ernie, is a very big gift, that
Oh, I
because
love it.
I'm a musician and I love the
Oh, I
music,
love it.
we share
feel
that.
I feel sorry for people that don't play an
Of
instrument.
course, yeah, yeah.
Because it's so much fun.
This is one thing I wanted to add to the conversation, just as a conclusion, was don't be afraid to pick up a guitar or a trumpet or anything, and don't think you have to play by notes. Like if you want to just pick that up and make sound, that's the best way to start.
Yeah.
And many musicians, artists are autodidactic. They learn themselves their own way. They don't even know chord structures. So, or notes for that matter. They play by ear, and maybe you're one of them. So, start time, Sam. I guess that's, yeah, one more minute. Any words of wisdom there, Ernie,
Any
to
words of wisdom?
send
Well,
our,
well, you know, just talking about music, uh, what to me is important. One of the things that's important is you can buy a record of some song you love or something, but I'm not sure. Talking for myself, I don't know if I can enjoy that song enough, appreciate it enough, because the the guy that recorded that song, the band that recorded it, they themselves can probably never, at least after a little bit of time, it can never reproduce that exact sound. So that particular song you have on a 45 or on an album or something can never be reproduced. You can only hear it on that record. That feel, that sound, that every little thing in that song, to me, that's just huge. Like when I
Yeah.
listen to that song, and when you see that band do that song on stage, it's not going to be the same as that record. So
No.
so I just have a great appreciation for records, just because you can never
Yes.
reproduce that in any way, and yet it stands the test of time. It sounds just as good now as it did 30 years ago. Exactly the same.
Well said, Ernie.
So
Yeah. Well said. And remember, our podcast, I forgot to mention this, starts with it's about music, collecting music, and everything in between. So that just summed it up beautifully, Ernie. Wish you guys a good week ahead, and we're going to continue on our journeys here, and we'll reach you next week here at GPAC, hopefully, if nothing gets in the way of our busy lives. So take care, everyone, and
keep on rocking.
in the free world.